Thank you, Madam Chair. I regret getting cut off earlier. I was just going to talk about the statement in Mr. Bay's testimony that I wanted to read back. And he said, there is a practical solution through science-based risk assessments and land management strategies. There is a middle way between a complete hands-off approach or the do-nothing approach and outdated forest management practices of extensive timber harvests that have created homogenized landscapes, making them prone to burning hotter. This middle road strategy protects large trees and wildlife habitat, conducts ecologically based commercial thinning of trees as the byproduct of restorative work, and reduces the risk to communities by returning beneficial fire to the landscape. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for that testimony. That's you conveyed the message that I've been trying to say since I've been on this committee, and I know you've seen this work in the field. Some words that you use in there, the do-nothing approach. When we do nothing, when we make the decision not to manage our forest, we made a management decision. We have to know that the forest doesn't care what policy we make here. They continue to grow and fill the growing space, and a no decision is a management decision. Also, I want to point out using the word of commercial thinning. One of the biggest mistakes I think we made is to think that it's wrong to do commercial thinning. Pre-commercial thinning is a cost with very little return to it. Commercial thinning allows you to recapture some of the cost of moving that crew into the woods, and it also makes the forest healthier. Now, you talked about patch thinning and different ways to do it, but we need to have the flexibility to do commercial thinning. Forests are different all across the country. This photo up here is from federal land in my state. This is not national forest, but it's Felsenthal National Wildlife Refuge. That may look like a healthy forest to some, but that's a control area, and there's not much biodiversity in there. Right conditions, that's subject to wildfire, catastrophic wildfire, and it's the control site. If you look at the next slide, the management regime is to go in and commercially thin, leave the big trees, leave different species of trees, and then to burn underneath. In the third slide, that's what it looks like when you're through. And those grasses that are coming up, those are seeds that have been in the soil for centuries, or not centuries, but decades. And they flush and they create great wildlife habitat. The plant and animal biodiversity is greater in that forest much greater than the one we first saw. And the amount of wildlife, turkey, deer, quail, and this is actually red-cockaded woodpecker habitat, which is an endangered species. So your approach works. It would look different in different states because forests are different, but that's not clear-cutting, and that's creating a good fire break. Ms. Harami, in your testimony, and thank you for what the Forest Service is doing to utilize the authorities that are there and the new authorities through Good Neighbor and hopefully the stewardship contracting. One thing that I think we can focus on more is the wildland-urban interface, and we should fund state and private forestry at higher levels because that's preventative medicine right there to allow, because a lot of the land in the WUI is not federal land. It's privately owned land, sometimes small woodlot owners that have no incentive to go in and manage those woodlots. I would like to look at the next slide. This is a map of the WUIs across the country. You can see most of them are in the east because there's higher population density. The areas subject to have the worst fires are in the west. Let's go to the next slide. This is a slide that may not mean much to you, but this is the campfire, and if you see the red hatched area, that is the boundary of the campfire, so that dark red line is where the fire stopped. That blue line is land owned by Sierra Pacific, a private company in California, and you can see the fire stopped on their property, and if you look closer, there's a light green hatched line. That's actually where a timber company put in a fire break. If we look at the next slide, that's what that fire break looked like. It wasn't a clear cut, it was where the forest had been thinned and the underbrush taken out. So again, Thank you all. I think if we implemented what you're talking about 30 or 40 years ago, we wouldn't be having a lot of the discussions we're having today. And if we can get good policy in place, 40 or 50 years from now, things will be a lot better. I yield back.
Mr. Westerman. Chair